In this video, I want to take a look at Oeksound's device, Bloom. If you aren't familiar with Oeksound, their mixing devices, Soothe and Spiff, are so influential. I think they've radically changed how people mix. And I know personally, I've been using those devices on every session for years. Every session, there's no doubt there's Soothe and Spiff everywhere, all over my music. It's for that reason that I really wanted to check out their new device, Bloom, which is an adaptive tone shaper. It does just that. It adaptively changes the tone of the sound based on the incoming signal. So unlike an EQ, which is statically going to change a sound, it's going to be changing the lows and highs as the sound evolves. It really easily gets like clear, warm, balanced sounds, and the device itself is really easy to use. Because I'm such a big fan of Oeksound, I actually reached out to them to see if they wanted to partner up on this video. So this video is sponsored by them, and I want to say a huge thank you. And if you want to support them, I'm going to leave a link to Bloom and of course their other devices in the description of this video. So let's dive into it and check out what it's all about. So as I mentioned, Bloom is an adaptive tone shaper, which means it's going to shape the sound based off the incoming signal. So I'm going to show you on drums, which is very dynamic with a huge swath of frequencies from lows to highs. Let's check it out. So this is the original sound. So what you're seeing down here is this flat line. That's the original frequency response, whatever that may be. And depending on this image, if it's going above the line, that means it's increasing that range. If it goes below the line, it's decreasing it. So as you can see, it's decreasing the sub, for example, decreasing when the clap hits, and overall increasing a lot of the mids. We can then use these faders here to work within the bands to further tone shape and increase that frequency or further reduce it. Now, unlike an EQ, again, it's not going to be static. It's still going to be adaptive, but you're going to be still getting more of that or less of that. So let's check it out. So I don't like how we're losing the kick completely. So let's keep the lows in. Let's get a bit more of that ultra high. Now I find the ultra highs are a bit too much. So what we can do is we can actually shrink this band to change what's being affected. So maybe some of the sub isn't being tone shaped and some of the ultra highs are not. Or you can even do the opposite. We can just be working on the lows or just be working on the highs and the mids come through unprocessed. Let's go back to how we had it though. And if that super ultra high is still too much, we can actually filter that out with this bottom fader here. Now, because we're working on drums, the attack and release are going to have a huge impact. If we slow down the attack, more transient comes through. And if we change the release, that's totally going to change the character of the body of the sound, which has to do a lot with feel when you're working on something like drums. Now, what's really cool, once we get past 7 here, we start to squish the sound, which starts to downward and upward compress. So you kind of get closer to almost like an OTT where you're really squishing the sound. And we can actually change this trim here, which automatically sets it so that the wet signal matches the dry signal. So we're getting a better representation of what we're listening to. And this squash cal here, when we click this, that'll set the gain pre-squish, which changes how it's affected. I notice the sides are starting to pop a lot in my left ear. So what we can do is we can actually mid-side split this or left-right split this. And you'll notice we have different amounts that each band is affected. So for example, I don't want the sub on the sides to be as affected as much. We can unlink this so it's reacting to the mids and sides differently. And then we can focus a bit more on the middle. So So we get a nice tight mono signal, or you can do the opposite. You can have it focus more on the sides. And if you have like a bass patch without a lot of side information, then it really starts to pop because that side information starts to separate more from the middle and really bloom and start to sound more in your face. Let's increase the quality too. And then obviously we're going to mix it. We don't want it to be so hyper squished. That's just a quick look at it. Let's dive in further with other examples. Let's put on something else. Let's work on this bass, for example. It's factory reset. That's just the default preset. See how the high mids are just starting to pop a little more. Let's get the ultra highs really increased. Let's increase the bass. I like squashing something like a bass because it starts to bring out stuff in the tail that you might not have heard otherwise. See how the room starts to come up? So in some ways, for me, this has almost started to replace OTT, which can be really intense and sometimes sound a little phasey the way it splits the bands. I find that this splits the bands a lot cleaner, can give me that sort of OTT hyper squish effect, but a lot more transparent and with easier control. Let's let some of the bottom come through naturally. Now let's unlink these so we can really change the stereo image a little. Okay, let's compare. That was just a few seconds of playing. Okay, so it sounds really good on bass. Let me show you on a song I'm working on. This is a song I'm working on without Bloom on it. So I like to use Bloom to to tell me how I can improve my master. So what I like to do is I like to just get the factory preset. And I like to see how it starts to shape this. So it really thinks I'm missing some 4K range. The rest looks pretty good. It seems to give me boost and cut certain areas of the mid, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. I can really see from this how certain parts of my top end need to be changed. Technically, you could even just leave this on a master if you wanted to, but I like to use it more as kind of like advice on how I should change things. It is quite transparent though. Depending on the right song, I think you could have it on the master. So I really like to use it in the sound design stage. Quite often in a track, I like to generate long random takes of sounds where I'll have some sort of patch that's randomly generating some sort of source content. And I like to have that get processed and balanced. So as it's recording, it sounds pretty balanced. So it's a lot easier to chop and use all together. So for example, I have this not so nice phase plant patch. Just randomly generating stuff. And then I like to combine that with, say, Rift, for example. Just randomly mash it with presets. Where this is really nice with Bloom is I can use the squish to really work this thing over the top. So no matter what source is kind of coming into it, it comes out a lot more similar. See, like with this patch, how it's really dynamic. big frequency spectrum. Well, this is really going to balance that out. Get a lot more of the top without it. So I really like how that balances things out when doing sound design. One way I've really been liking Bloom is for slotting two elements together in a track. So Bloom has this sidechain function, which allows you to take the input from another sound and have that tone shape the other sound. So where this is really good for slotting is, let's say, for example, we have two elements sitting together taking up the same range in a mix. So we have a pad and we have a pad. And together, they're very much masking one another. So with Bloom, what I like to do is take this input from the opposite sound, turn on sidechain, and start to sculpt that sound. Now what we're going to do is on the other instance of Bloom, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn sidechain on, and we're going to set this one up. We can even unlink the mid and side. So this one got really dark, kind of ended up taking the middle. And then this one ended up kind of flipping and being this smile. And they create almost this feedback loop where as the one becomes darker, the other one becomes brighter. And they slot a lot more like a puzzle piece now because they've taken on kind of opposite shapes, because again, the side chain is telling the other one to shape the other sound like this one would be shaped, and then they form around each other. While we're on the topic of sidechain, I've also been trying to see if there's other fun ways you can use it. For example, you can do a bit more traditional sidechain where we have a kick here, and that kick is going to sidechain tone shape this sound. So if, for example, if the kick's got a lot of bass, well, then it's going to push more bass out of this sound. If the kick has minimal high end, it's not going to take as much high end out. So it's kind of like a multi-band sidechain function. Check it out. So we can have it duck the lows even more. And what's interesting is it kind of compensate the highs up on this sound too, because it felt the kick didn't have enough highs. It's not going to replace traditional sidechaining, but there are some fun instances. I feel like this Bloom sidechain function hasn't been fully explored yet. There's interesting results you can get to, like sidechaining to really dynamic white noise, because white noise takes up the full frequency spectrum. So sounds start to like pulse in interesting ways. I haven't found all the use cases yet. So if you come up with anything interesting, let me know in the comments. I want to hear how you're using this tool. So I hope this is just getting you thinking about how powerful this tool is. It can really just bring out the clarity, the warmth of any sound and just balance it so nicely. I've already used it in a bunch of mixes, and I find I'm tossing it on so much because it's so easy to use, sounds good, and it doesn't take much finessing to get good results. So thank you again to Oeksound for sponsoring this video. I appreciate them wanting to partner up with me on this one. So if you guys want to support Oeksound, go check out Bloom in the description of this video. It's an awesome mixing tool. I really recommend it, and I hope you guys have fun using Bloom. See you in the next video. I'm Promoti. Peace.